It's time for Pure Performance.
Get your stopwatches ready. It's time for Pure Performance with Andy Grabner and Brian Wilson. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Pure Performance. My name is Brian Wilson, and as always, I have with me my co-host, Andy Grabner. He said we're going to try to be funny, so I'm going to try to not be.
Yeah,
Hi,
and
Andy.
you nailed it. You nailed it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, thank
That
you
was
so
the
much.
most unenthusiastic intro. Short side note, when I was going through files and organizing the Pure Performance directories, and I turned on episode 1 to hear what it sounded like. It was me interviewing you, I think, probably about, I forget exactly what about, because I didn't listen to the whole thing, but you were on your headset, you didn't have the mic yet, and it was, I was like, oh, we should probably re-air episode 1 sometime.
Yeah.
But this is episode 238 now.
Cool.
So yeah, it's been a long time. I'm just letting our guests know that, and our listeners, but yeah.
Cool. But that means, right, if we have a start like this, we can only go up from here, like not
Exactly.
being funny.
That was exactly what I was thinking.
That's perfect. Awesome.
We can only
Cool. Hey, we have a repeating topic though, because this topic never gets boring, and it is platform engineering. And I know we had plenty of discussions recently, also just the previous episode, which we have actually recorded yesterday from the day of the recording, was around platform engineering and how we can measure successful platform engineering teams. We talked about the DX core for metrics. So Daniel, just for you to know, and now this is your kind of cue for joining us on our little podcast here. Daniel Bryant, thank you so much for joining us. If I read out from your LinkedIn page, helping you build better platforms. You are a speaker at various conferences. You are co-author of CD in Java and Mastering API Architecture. Pretty cool. Daniel, thank you so much for being here. What else do people need to know about you?
Thanks, Andy. Yeah, thanks, Brian. No, it's great to see you again. And my background started as a Java developer, hence writing the book, right? Then I moved into doing more architecture stuff, hence writing the second book. And now I've got to write a third book, because I'm doing a lot more platform stuff. Like the last 10 or so years, building platforms as an IC, as a manager as well. Now, I've got to write a book, right? It's just, every stage of my career, I need to write a book. So that's coming next. But thank you for the invite. And 238 episodes, that is incredible. So I'm super happy to be included as one of those guests.
I had full hair when we started.
I was no less gray. I've been gray forever. So.
But it was 10 years ago, wasn't it?
10 years, wow.
10 years. I think it's 10 years now, yeah.
That's
every
impressive.
other week. Yeah. That was fun. And we always say, and I know this is now, sounds like a broken record for the people that listen to our podcast on a regular basis, we enjoy the podcast because we learn a lot from our guests, man.
Nice.
So, Daniel, so when we met at KubeCon in London, bumped into each other again and said, hey, it's about time to do a podcast, talk about platform engineering. We also had your colleague and our joint friend, Abby Bankser, on a recent podcast last year. You just mentioned she just walked out of the office.
That's I'm in the office as we're recording in London, just shy of London Bridge and the Shard as well. And we did a big meeting today, a company meeting with Syntasso where I'm working. And Abby and I were hanging out. We had lunch together kind of thing. So Abby's awesome. Abby's a force of nature. She's been doing so much good in the platform engineering world, as I'm sure you learned last time, contributing to the platform maturity model, helping the app delivery group and platforms group. Abby is just one of those folks that the energy and enthusiasm is kind of just contagious. You cannot help but get excited about platforms when Abby's doing her thing. So it's awesome to work with her.
Exactly. And also we had it was a pleasure having her on the podcast. Folks, if you're listening in and you want to go back to that episode, the link will be in the description. I'm just reading out one of the taglines that I wrote down back then. And she talked about platform engineering is more than just building platforms. It's about bringing the developer experience to all engineers with the goal to actually reach a 10x efficiency of your organization. It was a longer discussion, but I think there was a really cool statement. Now, yesterday in the podcast or the previous episodes, and this is the topic I want to get started with, Daniel, is around measuring the success of a platform. And I would just be interested in getting your perspective, because you shared a presentation that you did at the conference recently, and one of the slides was saying what gets measured gets managed. Give it over to you. What does need to get measured so we can better manage it?
Yeah, I'll do a preamble as well, Andy, in that it's shocking the amount of folks that I chat to in my day-to-day job that don't measure or don't have goals with platform engineering. And I know like research from other folks like Humanitech folks, platformengineering.org, I think even the DX folks, same kind of deal. It's a very common thing. I think less than half of people sort of anecdotally we chat to, and again, the surveys don't measure their platform. And if you don't measure, how do you ever know you're actually providing value? How do you know you're making a difference? So I always like caveat those kind of conversations, because we can all measure stuff, but you've got to tie that measurement back to your goal. What are you actually trying to do with your platform, right? Is it go faster, reduce risk, increase scalability, all these kind of good things? And with that in mind, what I would also say is an amazing book that really shaped my thinking. I only read it about 6 months ago. I was actually on the plane to KubeCon in Salt Lake City in North America. In November, I think it was. And the book is called Platform Engineering on O'Reilly by Camille Fournier and Ian Nolan. They are two awesome people. They sort of wrapped it together, talking a lot about product health, impact metrics, and guardrail metrics. And I'll just seed that for a moment, because I've been talking about all these different metrics, and they all fit into that model. But once I read the book, I think it's like chapter 5, it's amazing. The book's straight up amazing. I think if you're a manager looking to understand platforms, like it's a real good jump off. But as an IC, as a person that's doing the code, it's just a really good framing for the kind of language you're probably going to have to use when talking to, your peers, managers, these kind of things. But Camille and Ian really made me think about, like, we a lot of us, we know the impact metrics and the guardrail metrics, particularly for things like DORA. Do you know what I mean? Like sort of an impact metric is like lead time to delivery, lead time to impact. And then change fail percentage would be something like a guardrail metric, because you can go fast, but if you're constantly braking, that's not a good look, right? So you always want to have the impact metric and the guardrail metric kind of playing off against each other. So I really like that framing. And then Camille and Ian also said about product health metrics. And I think this is kind of a lot of folks instantly jump to when they're talking about platforms. You're thinking product health is like the adoption rate of the platform, or the time to 10th pull request of an engineer onto the platform, those kind of good things. But I think that book really helped me build a sort of mental model that when I'm building a platform, what kind of metrics do I want to capture, and how does that move me forward?
Super interesting. Thank you so much. I looked up the book, and folks, we will add the link to that book also. It's called Platform Engineering, a Guide for Technical Product and People Leaders. Now, talking about books, I have to make a little bit of a self-promotion here, because also thanks to Kratix and to Sentasso. Yeah,
it's been a while.
Thanks to Sentasso, we also did a little bit of a book signing
that was awesome.
Of our book, Platform Engineering for Architects. I hope on one of those long haul flights to the next KubeCon, maybe you will have also time to read through our book.
Yes, it's been awesome, Andy. So Max tipped me off to it, because you mentioned Kratix in the book, and I was chatting to Max a bunch, and that was fantastic. Like there's so much to learn about platform engineering, right? Particularly if you're starting out, getting like that book is a great jumping off point. Do you know what I mean? Because I think people get a bit overwhelmed when they're coming on to building platforms for the first time. So that book is a great starting point in terms of understanding all your options. So +1 to the book from me.
Yeah. For me, the coming back to the earlier thing you said is, and that's the shocking reality, right? Less than half of the people that you are talking to, they really don't know what is the goal of the platform and how they can measure their activities against that goal. And this is, and then here's one of my thoughts that I had, and correct me if I'm wrong, or tell me what you see. I see a lot of platform engineering initiatives kind of being driven by very technical people, great engineers, right, that want to improve the life of their colleagues. But those are engineers that never had to build a product for an end consumer. Yeah. And while the end consumers are technical folks, are engineers, if you don't have a product mind, if you don't have product thinking, if you don't first think about what is the real problem that you want to solve and what will your solution actually then provide, what impact will it have, why does somebody want to use your platform? If you don't have this type of thinking, it's going to be very challenging to really become successful with it. And so what I've seen is a lot of great thoughts, a lot of great initiatives, but sometimes the purely technical background of these engineers sometimes hold them back from real success.
100% agreed, Andy. I've been very fortunate in my career to work with some amazing product owners, product managers, and I definitely, my sort of first time I was building platforms probably 10 years ago, I wasn't working with a team like that. And to your point, the infrastructure engineers were incredible people. I learned so much from them, like Puppet and Chef back in the day. But to your point, they'd not even had the product experience I'd had as an application developer. Because as an app dev, I did get interaction with the customers, but the folks who've been, historically racking and stacking or then doing infrastructure as code had no product experience. And they taught me a whole bunch about infrastructure as code and, how think performance, so in terms of the metal performance, things like that. I learned a ton, but I really taught them coding paradigms like design patterns and product thinking. And it was remarkable seeing the sort of change in attitude, because if you don't have that product mindset, you don't start with your customer. Do you know what I mean? I think as an engineer, a lot of us just see a problem and we want to solve it. And that's great. But if you're just scratching your own itch, you're not often thinking, what is this actually addressing other people's needs? Is this solution going to be scalable? Is, what's the day two story like, right? In terms of how do we upgrade this thing? How do we, maintain it going forward? If I leave the company, who's going to maintain it? All those kind of good things. So I think that product experience, even as an app dev, is really useful. And I got to shout out my colleague, Kat Morris. Kat did a great talk with Stefan from DKB at Platt Eng Day, same event we caught up. And they literally did a product management or product ownership, I think it was called, for engineers, for platform engineers in particular. So folks go to the Platt Eng Day website, they can find that talk. And Kat and Stefan, both product people, both technical people, talked about exactly what you said, Andy, the benefits of investing a bit of time in learning about product management, product ownership, and then it just enables you to have much more success as a platform builder. Because if you build the stuff and no one uses it or it gets thrown away, it's just disheartening, isn't it? As an engineer, you want your stuff to be used. So I always advise folks I mentor, more junior folks and more folks from the infrastructure background, learn about product stuff. And Kat and Stefan's video is a really good jumping off point.
Cool. So you said from Platform Engineering Con last year?
Platform Engineering Day at London also, Andy. Yeah. It was like a colo day on the Tuesday, and I think we met on the Wednesday and Thursday. But yes, I'll ping the link afterwards. But it's a really good video that talks about product ownership as an engineer.
A great reminder again, all of the talks from KubeCon and also the co-located days, they're all on YouTube. So if people are raving about how great KubeCon is and you couldn't make it, the sessions are all online. Sorry, Brian, over to you.
I was going to say, I think that product thing ties directly into something I saw, Daniel, in one of your slides about, you're not building a platform. You're building and I'm paraphrasing this in my own view. You're not building a platform. You're building a platform for devs to use.
100%.
Right? And with that product mindset, it's got to be, what do they need? Are they going to be adopting it? All these kind of things, right? But you have to find out from them, what do they need? What's going to be useful? Because you could build any platform, but as you said, if no one's using it, it could be the best platform in the world, but you just spent a bunch of time. But that also goes back into, you mentioned the idea of how to measure these things. And I think, especially for an engineer, it's very tempting to go back to standard types of metrics of like, is it up? Are we having failures? Is it responding, right? And it's like, well, those matter, but you can infer that that's working if you're looking at, is it being adopted? Are people pushing stuff through it?
Agreed.
Like taking a look at, the age-old battle between, I want to look at my low-level metrics as opposed to the product view of, are customers using it? Is it satisfying their needs? And are they happy using it, right? And then you have all the other telemetry behind it to understand if that's not happening. Okay, now we can look at that other stuff, right? But those higher up goals, and this is where you were talking about DOOR and some, the guardrail, and I forget the third one. But that's where all those things come in, because you have to look at it from that point of view first.
Yeah, completely agree. And I think you mentioned about the DX Core 4, which is a great framework, and some of it sort of pulled from Space as well, which Dr. Nicole Forsgren and others worked on. And I really like that, Brian. To your point, if definitely think of your company goals. Why are we building a platform as a company? What are our goals as a dev team, as a platform team? But thinking about some of the space frameworks like satisfaction, performance, and I'm going to mangle the rest of the acronyms, I guess. But it's a really good framework. If anything, it can be hard to get your head around because it is so much more flexible than, say, Dora, where you've literally sort of given 4 or 5 metrics, depending on what version of the framework you're used to. But the space framework is a really nice way, to your point. Once you sort of pop the hood, once you're looking under the hood, so to speak, of the car, you really can get to the nitty gritty if you want. And I think Dr. Nicole Forsgren, Abby Noda, amazing people in that space, have really done a lot of the good thinking, and I'm happy to stand on their shoulders, as we say, right? And learn from them.
Mm-hmm. Hey, the second thing you shared with us was around anti-patterns. I really liked also the title of the blog post you wrote it in March this year was called Platform Building Anti-Patterns, Slow, Low, and Just for Show.
That's right.
And if I go through it, there are a couple of things that stick out. But one of them I wanna start with, and you call it template as a service. Unable to scale past day one. And the reason why this is interesting, when I do my demos around platform engineering, it is actually often starting with this templating feature, right? It is about how can you onboard a new service, how can you make developers more efficient as they start. But can you fill us in? What do you mean with this template as a service, unable to scale past day one? What are some of these anti-patterns?
Yeah, sure thing, Andy. I don't know if I think I put it in the blog, but we often talk about this anti-pattern as a puppy for Christmas, right? So like a template as a service, like when I was a developer, it made sense. I want to get started and I'm given a bundle of like code. Maybe I was a Java dev, right? I'm given a Maven POM and some Java directories structure, and maybe I've given some Terraform code or something to get me started. And that's great on day one. Just as like when you get a puppy, right? Day one, everyone loves a puppy. Day two, when that puppy's made a mess in the corner, not so good. Day three, you got to go and walk the puppy, and you got to walk that puppy every day. It's the same with templates as a service. Day one, super happy, get me started, amazing. But imagine now we've got like 100 different teams in the org that have all taken that template. Now, say there's a vulnerability in like part of the template we've inherited, either like a dependency, like a code dependency, or maybe like Postgres has become vulnerable, right? 0 day, and you've got to, as a platform engineering team, you've got to upgrade that dependency. You've got to make sure everyone, these 100 teams now, are upgraded. And the snag is like in a big org, you sometimes just lose visibility of who's got that template, who is even using that template. And if you can find them, how do you convince them to upgrade? Often you think, I'll just do automated pull requests, like GitHub bot, right? But people have customized that template, and then you can't do an exact pull request. And this is why I say the puppy for Christmas. Great on the day one. On the day two, templates can cause more trouble than they're ultimately worth. And I think we talk a lot in Syntasa and Kratix, is you really want to have these templates being dynamic, being able to, one click of a button, be able to upgrade all your Postgres's or fix all the kind of libraries, these things. And we see so many times that people get really excited, particularly around, let's say, a portal and a pipeline. They go, I've got some Backstage, I've got some, GitHub Actions or something, and you can get very far on that on day one. But then they, get really disheartened when they get vulnerabilities, issues, they want to upgrade en masse. Day two story we talk about, and that's where we see this anti-pattern, Andy, in terms of like the templates. Unless you've got some way to dynamically update them, they become stale very quickly.
Mm-hmm. And I know obviously you work for Kratix or for Syntasso, and Kratix is your platform. Can you quickly fill us in how you solved this problem with Kratix?
Yeah, sure thing, Andy. So with Kratix, the core concept is promises, and promises are really just an API onto your platform. So if you're in the Kubernetes world, they're effectively CRDs, custom resources. And you can, as a platform engineer, expose an API to your platform, users, and you can say, hey, database, I simply want a name, a size, a region, these kind of things. Very simple API for developers to get started. You can deploy that via CLI, via backstage via some other mechanism. But the critical thing that's been built into Kratix is this notion of workflows. So it's kind of a little bit like GitOps, if you're familiar with GitOps, but kind of at the platform layer, and it's sort of one level of abstraction over Kubernetes. You can actually, with Kratix, consistently reconcile the platform components. And we might get on in a minute to talk about golden bricks and golden paths, because that's where it kind of makes a bit more sense as well. But fundamentally, Kratix, the promises are the APIs. They're APIs onto your platform services, databases, maybe like a Java build pack or Kafka service, that kind of thing. And as platform engineers, you define a series of workflows, might be, say, provisioning the actual infrastructure, generating SBOMs, running a series of security tests, these kind of things. And because it's kind of like a live system that's continually reconciled, when you are fixing a zero-day vulnerability, all the things will get updated. That makes sense. Because you have this notion of promises, but where the sort of bricks analogy or Lego bricks analogy comes in, you can build platform components on sort of promises on promises. We call this compound promises. So like, you have a database, a Java service, and some other things. Well, that might become in the banking world a know your customer service. And then that service itself becomes part of a dependency on another thing. So it's kind of like, it can get quite complicated, the stacks you have in your platform, but Kratix always has links to all of the different promises, the different components of your platform. So at any moment, you can say, upgrade all the promises that are Postgres, and it will happen, rather than these templates that are kind of deconnected or not connected. As soon as you put a template out into the wild, it's gone. Unless the team is reporting back into you, hey, I'm using your template, that kind of thing. Kratix trying to sort of balance the centralization versus the decentralization, but it maintains a link to all the things being deployed, and it makes that day two story so much better.
Can you quickly help me understand? It sounds what you've explained with those promises, and what it just the example that you walked through. There's some analogies to cross-plane and compositions.
100%. I get this question all the time, Andy. You're on it. You're well ahead of that. I've got to show you, like cross-plane. There's Humanitech, like various resource definitions. There's Fusion Stack in this space as well. There's sort of we all operate at different parts of the stack. Is the way I kind of define it. For me, cross-plane is an amazing infrastructure as code tool. Love it. If you're using Kubernetes and you're not sort of like in the HashiCorp world or a particular hyperscaler world, like cross-plane is a fantastic way to define your infrastructure in things you know and love, custom resources. I think the fundamental difference between, say, Kratix and cross-plane is the approach. Kratix is more at the platform API level, and I see cross-plane more at the infrastructure API level. The two can work together. We have a lot of customers that do use cross-plane with Kratix. So effectively, Kratix, like they define their platform components in Kratix, and then it calls out to cross-plane to provision those things. But with the work they're doing on cross-plane 2 and the compositions, the gap between, say, Kratix and cross-plane is narrowing a little bit. You can now put sort of arbitrary logic into cross-plane compositions. What I've heard from folks, I was chatting to a bunch of very interesting people at KubeCon. I think the testability story of Kratix is a bit nicer in terms of the way we define the workflows, the inputs, outputs, very testable. And the sort of the day two stories around having these composable promises is a bit nicer. But just to be clear, like happy to debate. I'm biased, right? Because I work for Syntasso, and the reason I joined the company was I love Kratix. I love crossplane before I joined as well, and I see crossplane really valuable for the infrastructure as code. For me, Kratix is a nice kind of orchestrator that sits on top.
Yeah. No, cool. And I didn't want to get into any battle. I think this is the nice thing about the cloud native community, that obviously people can, they will pick and choose what makes most sense for them. Folks, in case you have not heard about Kratix before, we'll also link to it, but it's kratix.io. That's KRATIX.io. And if you open up the website, Building Better Platforms, it's an open source platform framework for building composable internal development platforms. Back to the anti-patterns, because I think there was other things in there as well. I know people can read obviously the blog, but are there other anti-patterns besides the templates that you wish more people would be aware of when they start down their journey of building platforms?
Yeah, I do think baking in compliance and workflows early on, Andy, is a key thing. And we see a lot of our customers, come to us around this as well. It's very easy to provision the infrastructure and deploy an application, but how do you make it compliant to your company's rules and regulations? So we work with a whole lot of financial service companies, a whole lot of insurance companies, medtech, highly regulated industries. And what we find is a lot of folks sort of might jump on a traditional PaaS to spin up things very fast, but then IT gets wind of it and they're like, hey, is that deployment over there compliant with the org? And they've sort of traded off the speed and the safety, which is a bit of an anti-pattern, right? So I think you have to make sure your platform offers that balance of speed, safety, and scalability, and makes it easy to do the right thing as a developer. I say bake in those compliance checks early, those governance checks. We talk a lot about like shift left. A lot of people say, I need to shift everything left. But even in my time as a developer, what shift left often meant was I was just given more responsibility, more things to manage. And like, there's only so much scope we've all got as humans, right? So I think what I hear a lot now is like shifting down is better. So shifting some of that responsibility into the platform. So developers, by default, if you spin up a new service, you get that compliance baked in. You get that DRBC, the disaster recovery, baked in. You get observability baked in. These are critical things, right? But I think make it easy to do the right thing, and have that on your thinking point from day one. I see far too many platforms that go super fast with just doing the templates, just getting the day one story good, and then when the rest of the organization catches up and says, "Hey, I can't observe that thing. Hey, that thing's not secure," and then everyone's like, "Uh-oh, I've got to now retrofit all that stuff into all my stuff I've got out there now," and that is a nightmare.
Yeah. Yeah, I also like the term shift down. I think, Brian, when we had Marcio Lena on the call, on the podcast a couple of months ago, he was also really big on that. As another term that we use internally, instead of shifting left, is expanding to the left. And what that means, like your example with security and observability, right? These are typically good practices that you do in production. So if you do it in production, the question is if you can expand to the left. So how can the people that are taking care of observability and security and compliance in production, how can they expand their tools and best practices left into the development team? And obviously then where platform engineering comes in is how can you, expanding left means how can you make this then available, and you make it available through an easy to consume platform, through a self-service platform. But the expanding left for me is a nice way, because where we see most people start and where it's mandatory, right? Security, compliance, and observability is production, and then you're expanding it left. So the same tools are used across the software delivery lifecycle. And with platform engineering, that's obviously then a great story, because you bake it in, you shift it down into the platform, and then you expand it to the left. Yeah, cool.
Yeah, it's a nice way of framing it.
Yeah, cool. So we talked about measurement, we talked about anti-patterns. Another thing that you sent over to us had a very nice title, and you said the future of platform engineering is democratic.
Yes.
So there was a really good good blog post also for March. It seems you were really active in March. I would assume this was probably just before KubeCon, and you wanted to get all of these blog posts out. But it says platform democracy, rethinking who builds and consumes your internal platform. So the future of platform engineering is democratic. What does that mean?
Yeah. You've got to be careful with the politics these days, right? It can be a loaded term. But it's a nice analogy, because what we see a lot in Syntasso, and we've already talked about one thing, is fleet management. So fleet management is the ability to manage all your services on the day two. We talked about that just a moment ago, right? We have the notion of promises, but there's other things that exist out there. But in particular, like Kratix really focuses on making that ability to manage your platform as a fleet. No matter how small it is, no matter how big it is, managing as a fleet. I think that's not controversial. A lot of folks are like, no, totally makes sense. I have quite a large IT estate. This is a fleet. But the sort of second part to that, when your company gets to a certain size, you have to make it democratic, in that you have to enable other teams to contribute to the platform. So almost like dovetailing what we just said previously, an anti-pattern is when there's a massive organization and it's just one platform team, and they're often the department of no, much like the security team, right? Platform that you say, hey, I want to use Mongo instead of Postgres, and the platform team's like, well, we don't support that. No. Do you know what I mean? But if you can imagine a database team we work with these big banks, they have like literally database teams, networking teams, security teams. If you can enable those teams to contribute to the platform, to democratize the contribution, and critically have them owning their components going forward, everything just scales so much better. So I mean, rather than one department, platform engineering team, being overloaded with requests or having to like think about all the things every day, if you can push out some of that responsibility, like we do in democracy, right? It's not a perfect system, democracy, but in general, we sort of push around various parts of responsibility. And that's what Colin, like my boss, talks about a lot in terms of once you get to a certain scale, like if you're like a 10-person dev team, probably up to like 50, maybe even 100, it's not super important. Fleet management is really important for you. You want to be able to manage your estate as a fleet. But it's when you get past that sort of Dunbar's number, 150, like is a sort of famous number we talk about a lot, then the complexity of your team, of your system just goes up. Then you need to think about how do I enable contributions? And this is fundamentally this. We sort of, there was a few others we bumped into. I can't remember who else was chatting about it. Like, we're like, hey, we like this term platform democracy. Kind of, I can relate to that in that I enable other folks to contribute to the platform. I enable producers and consumers to meet. Like the platform almost becomes a marketplace. Do you know what I mean? In terms of you have these producers, hey, here's a Mongo, here's a Postgres, here's a Kafka. And these consumers are then going, I need a document store. Oh, that looks great over there. Mongo will do for me. And once you get that kind of two-sided marketplace, a bit like an eBay or an Etsy or that kind of thing, right? If you get that, a certain size org, that's so much more sustainable than just one platform team doing everything.
And he was clapping there.
Yeah.
It didn't pick up the audio. Were you clapping out loud?
No, I was.
Okay.
No,
I didn't know if that was the Zoom
silent
background silencing. I was like, technology thwarted your applause. You were golf clapping. All right.
So I love the idea, but that also means you need to make it as easy as possible so that the average consumer engineer can actually contribute. Because if you have to then expand or contribute to the platform by having to write complex Go code or I don't know, in whatever, I'm just making something up, right? Is it in any best practices there? Like what are some of the ways how you would extend the platform?
Yeah, I mean, shameless plug, Andy. It's like with Kratix, I'm sort of baked into it, right? In terms of the notion of promises is just an API. So you can back that API with a series of workflow stages using anything you like. Bash, Go, Terraform, Crossplane, all these great things. So fundamentally, long as you can understand the Promise API, and we typically do a lot of workshops for folks. Again, it's open source Kratix, so folks can check out the docs as well. And once you kind of get started there and understand the notion of the Promise API, you can actually put in whatever you like at the back end to do the steps, to do the stages. And then it's more about coordinating with your organization to understand what's our best practices, these kind of things, right? So as with all things, there's a technical side and there's a socio side, right? So we say platforms are inherently kind of socio-technical things. So I think if you can agree as a company, this is like technically how you contribute. And if you're not using Kratix, you can do pull requests or requests for comments, that kind of approach, right, from the technical side. But then you need some kind of contract, some kind of API, which enables those socio conversations. Like I'm wanting this, or I am building this to expose to others. Like the API has to be documented. For example, if you as a developer want to spin up that know your customer service early on, like you've got to have some way for other people to discover that service. Like, oh, Andy's written a know your customer service. I was going to do the same thing. I'll just use his. Do you know what I mean? And then you've got to expose in the API all the parameters, all the properties that you'll need to actually instantiate the thing. So there is a bunch of sort of dynamics, but you need to have something that cues the conversation. If you've got the API defined, you can then put that in a service catalog. People can discover it. They can understand self-serve, right? They can understand how they're going to use that. And that is a real key enabler for kind of scaling out these contributions.
Now it is mid of 2025, and obviously there is no way around bringing up the next topic for me, because what you just explained to me sounds very much like I could do this with Agentic AI and basically these extensions to the platform. This marketplace could be MCP servers that are providing an API to certain tasks. And then I, as an engineer, could just talk with my AI agent, client, or whatever it is, and say, hey, I need to do X, Y, Z. You go figure out how this works compliantly, securely in my organization. Is this have you? I mean, I'm sure this topic must have come up in your conversations.
It's like you're reading our roadmap, Andy. Right? So my colleague Shane Dowling just put a blog post out because we did as a sort of hack day project an MCP server for Kratix, open source Kratix. Right? I don't know if he actually open sourced the MCP server in the end. It was based on fast MCP, but it was cool because you could actually I think he was using Claude and just chatting, saying, "Hey, I need a Redis." And it was like, what kind of Redis do you like? And going through. And then one of my other colleagues, Jake, has been using Gemini Vertex to automatically generate promises, generate Terraform code and do these things. So I'll be very candid though, it's early days from our side, but we're getting feedback from the community that people want to take advantage of AI in particular for migration projects. So they've got all this kind of legacy code, the money-making code, right? And how do they bring it into the new world? They might sort of have a platform kicking off, and but they need some kind of like migration process. And I can well imagine, as you said, AI being a great enabler then in terms of interacting with the platform, actually building out various platform components. Like from our experiments, like Jake has definitely said to me, and Shane, you still need to be doing a heck of a lot of checking. Do you know what I mean? Because there was hallucinations. I think Shane even put that in his blog post. There was a few little edge cases and things. I remember Jake saying there was a whole bunch of Terraform that was generated that was nonsense. Do you know what I mean? But like, but it showed promise. Excuse the pun. It showed promise, and we were really excited. And we sort of put it out to a few customers and said, "Hey, what are you thinking?" And it's an interesting mix in that some customers are like, "I've got these problems. I don't really care about AI." Do you know what I mean? And I just solved my problems. I've got a platform on fire. Whatever, help me solve this stuff. But some are like, I've been given a budget for AI. I'm not sure how to spend it. Knock yourself out, right? In terms of like, come on board with some ideas. And I'm with you. Like a platform seems like a very sort of logical choice where many different types of people are interacting with the thing. You have platform engineers, you have QA folks, developers, you have managers, right? Like if you can all converse in that kind of language, human-like language, and have agents in the back end doing stuff, I think it's a good idea.
Yeah. Is it a blog post that is called "What We Learned Building a Prototype AI-Driven Dev Interface for Kratix"?
You got it, Andy. Thank you. That's
cool.
it. Yeah.
Shane
published it recently.
There's so many links on this one.
I know. Yeah, you're really active in
a lot of great
writing
stuff,
blogs.
Though. And I think that this came up actually in our previous podcast a little bit with the AI, right? Because Andy's a machine. Everyone from his country is a machine.
All controversial.
No, he's Austrian, so he's Arnold Schwarzenegger, Terminator. I used to play Arnold sound bites in between. That was a long time ago.
I'm not gonna lie, massive fan. Yeah.
But yeah, one of the things about adoption and usage, right, which is what we were talking about with building these platforms, is all right. If I have to go out now and besides staying on top of all the things I need to stay on top of to do my job, learning the latest and greatest on my job, and learn the ins and outs on how to use this platform, that becomes a roadblock. And I really do see an exciting future. There's all this, talk, AI this, it's going to take away, it's going to do all these things. But I think one of the really attractive ones is like, I don't need to learn the ins and outs of this tool, at least until I need to dive into it. If I can just interface and 90% of the time it's doing exactly what I need, then fantastic, right? It's just going to make things so much quicker, right?
Yeah, 100% agree, Brian. Even so my background is Java dev, and I've done a whole lot of Java, and I've written my fair share of, Go or whatever. But I do find now when I'm playing around with Go, like to your point, I know the rough design patterns, I know what I want to accomplish, but I don't know the syntax or I don't know the idioms of the language. But like to your point, I can literally be chatting away in VS Code, and it's like I'm doing sort of the big picture outline stuff, and it's filling in the gaps, which used to take me freaking ages on Stack Overflow to figure out. I can see the same thing with platforms, right? It totally makes sense.
Now, one more thought on this, and we may, Brian, have covered this the other day when we talked about MCPs with, now the name blanks. No, we had a talk about MCPs from TELUS, one of our dear friends from TELUS. I'm just currently blanking.
Tell us who it was.
Yeah, tell us who it was, exactly. Dana Harrison, because we talked about MCPs. coming back to a software engineering question now. So let's assume, right, more and more people will be able to use all these systems because they can now interact with those systems through natural language. And they don't have to learn the ins and outs, which means as more and more people using it through natural language, these AI agents will go off and make many, many different API calls to all of these different tools. Have we seen, and I'm not sure if this is your field of expertise, but just thought I'll throw it out. Have you seen that we need to get ready for an influx in API calls, that we need to change and definitely double down on better scalable APIs? Because in the end, right, it's no longer just be the experts that use a particular tool, but it's going to be the AI agents that are using the APIs of those tools to make it easier accessible to everyone else. So, and I fear that if we're not doing a good job, then we're going to kill the backend systems. And killing does not mean killing, but maybe they're getting slow. And then obviously the end user experience is not great, and then they will blame the AIs for it. But have you thought about this, that we need to rethink how we design APIs and how to make them scalable, especially in the new AI interaction patterns?
Yeah, interesting question, Andy. So my previous gig when I worked at Ambassador Labs was focusing very much on API gateways. So I did a whole bunch of work on Envoy, a whole bunch of work, with Nginx and all these kind of good things. And now very much like MCP, as soon as it started bubbling up, I was like, I can see a lot of similarity between, classic REST APIs or even SOAP back in the day when I was doing SOAP, right? And I think all the good design principles and all the dangers that are lurking with existing APIs apply to MCP. But to your point, that the scale of which things can go wrong is magnified. Do you know what I mean? Like, as in, we can always make massive amounts of calls against an API, but what's the risk profile to your business now? APIs have become more and more business kind of critical. So I just think really from what I'm seeing, I'm reading some great blogs by Christian Poster. I'll give buddy Christian a good shout out. He's working over at Solo, and he's doing some amazing sort of blogs and discussions around MCP and APIs. Because I've sort of moved on a little bit from APIs from the API gateway world. Now I'm more on APIs in the platform world. But I think a lot of platforms they're internally focused, so you can put much more strict guardrails on who can call the platform, what they can do with it. But when you've got a public-facing API, you can have denial of service. You can have people sending trash your way, just trying to hack it, all these kind of things. And I think that will only get worse the more ways you can call an API and the veracity, agents can, in theory, just, scour the internet all day, 24/7, constantly going at it. So I think all the things we've been talking about for years in terms of security, rate limiting, DDoS protection, observability is a critical one. Again, if you don't observe the thing, you don't know what's going on at all. It just becomes more and more important. And I think the scale, the impact is just getting bigger with agents.
Yeah. And also because agents are, non-deterministic. Everything we do when we call APIs, it is more deterministic. That means we can test for it, and the same input will produce the same number of calls to the backend system. But this will change because the same prompt.
That's a really good point.
Right?
Yeah.
The same prompt can today produce a different number of API calls to the backend than tomorrow.
Yeah, it makes testing particularly a challenge, right?
Yeah, exactly. But I do hope that a lot of smart people that spend more time on all of these challenges will figure this out and put in some guardrails so that AI agents don't go rogue and and do something bad.
Yeah,
Awesome.
It sounds, Andy, like a lot of the same kind of problems we face today, right? Probably a lot of the same kind of anti-patterns, right? It even sounded like you were talking about an N+1 API call issue, which exists today, but it's the big thing are people thinking about it in this context, right? And getting to if we talk about shift left, shifting our brains to shift API, maybe to really start, baking that stuff in, baking that quality, baking all the security checks, all that stuff into that, and getting it done now. Because if we see random leaps in AI technology, right? And sometimes it's that's going to maybe take 10 years, and then 6 months later, some breakthrough comes in. It's 10 years is now, right? And if we're not ready for it now, or we're not building towards readiness, so for anybody who's listening, please start doing that.
Yeah.
Because...
Great.
Cool. Hey, Daniel, thank you so much for giving us the time to talk about a topic, obviously, that is very dear to your heart, because you're working for a company that is trying to make the life of platform engineers better. Not just platform engineers, but for everybody that wants to contribute to platforms. Thanks for the democratizing platform keyword now that we have, the term. Did we miss anything? Any final thoughts from your side to our listeners?
No, thank you, Andy. Thank you, Brian. I appreciate the chat. If folks want to reach out to me, I'm at Daniel Bryant UK on most of the interwebs. You can find me on LinkedIn, X, GitHub, all the usual places there. I love a good chat, particularly about platforms. The reason I do enjoy sort of like sharing these ideas, and it's always great to chat with folks like yourselves, but getting that feedback from you, from the community, is how I learn. So please, folks, do reach out to me if you've got any questions. You want to get involved with Cratix, you want to get involved in the other things I'm working on as well. I love that feedback on those questions. So keep them coming.
Cool.
Going to get a bunch of AI bots reaching out to you now.
Yeah, exactly. Humans only, right? That's a good point.
Awesome. Yeah, and I'm very much looking forward. I'm sure our paths cross again later this year. I'm sure you will be in Atlanta for KubeCon.
Definitely, Andy. Thank you very much for yourselves and your colleagues for coming along and signing the book at the Syntasso booth. That was awesome. So yeah, you will definitely see us. We're not exactly sure what we're doing yet. We submitted our talks, as I'm sure you and others have as well. So we'll see what kind of talks we get, how many folks we'll send over there. But yeah, definitely, I'm going to be in Platform Con, which is coming up really soon. The videos are going to be online. Definitely then it's Fastflow Conf in London, and then KubeCon. And we'll definitely do Plat Eng Day as part of KubeCon. So I encourage folks, listeners, the Colo days, I know there's observability days, there's platform days, security days, many interesting days at KubeCon are where a lot of very interesting people meet. So I do encourage you listeners to come along and check that out and come and say hi. If I'll be on the Syntasso booth or doing a talk, hopefully. I'd love to meet you and say hi.
Cool.
Awesome.
Brian, that was episode 200 something. I don't remember the number.
and it's funny, you know, Daniel, in the beginning you were talking about how enthusiastic was it Abby, right?
Abby, my colleague Abby, yeah.
You're very enthusiastic as well. It must be something in the water or Cratix. I don't know.
It's fantastic. We're all very similar, Brian. As in, like, we've got to be careful it doesn't get too overhyped at times, right?
Are you drinking water? Genuinely,
yeah. To Andy's point, we genuinely all care about like platforms to some degree in terms of whether we've got a software engineering background, an architecture, a platform, product owner background. We all genuinely do like care. As I can tell you both do as well. Like, we spend 8 hours a day at our job. If you don't enjoy it, I know some folks have got to do what they got to do, but I'm very privileged to enjoy my job, and that makes it so much easier. Like for yourselves, I'm sure the same. So much easier to be enthusiastic, right?
That's true. Exactly. Anyway, thank you so much for sharing. I know our last podcast was similar topic. I don't think these get old, though. I think there's so much to uncover, and every conversation has a different angle, different aspects to it. And there's going to be a lot of platform in the future. So it's very relevant. So hopefully our listeners are enjoying this all. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in once again. Tuning in, right? That's an old radio. Yeah. All the old words we say I'm going to tape it, right? Anyhow, I'm going to digitize this audio. Anyway, I'm being stupid now. Let me wrap this up. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, Andy, as always, for making this possible. Bye-bye.
Bye.